Welcome to Dr Joe Unplugged. The topics discussed in this podcast will reflect my opinions and are not in any way to be regarded as medical advice. It's sometimes said if you can remember the 60s, you weren't there. Not totally sure that applies to everyone. And obviously a little bit depends upon your age at the time and what you might have been doing. I think it's fair to say that comment has not been passed so much about the 1970s and maybe the early 80s. Those who can remember those days, and I'm talking about the 70s up to the early 80s, or those who, and it's pretty easy to do this, can source pictures of people from that time will notice something that is quite different to today. And that is the number of citizens who were overweight or obese was much lower. Much lower. Now, in episode 84, we spoke about 50 years of failure and the introduction of the low-fat dietary guidelines based on some work in 1976 that aimed to reduce type 2 diabetes and obesity. Now, a very cursory glance around will show that not only has that not worked, it's actually had the exact opposite effect. Rates of type 2 diabetes have trebled and rates of obesity have quadrupled. Now, you would think at some point that people might say, well, it really seemed like a good idea at the time. We meant well. It all seemed logical. But back in the real world, the results are not what we expected, and maybe even a bit probably a lot worse than that. They're actually the exact opposite of what we expected, and not by a small margin either. You know, if rates had gone up 2 or 3%, maybe we might say, well, look, give it a bit longer, maybe there'll be some progress. But, when it's gone by a 3- and 4-fold factor in the opposite direction to what was intended, then at some point you would really, really hope, I'd go further than that. You would expect, but probably wrongly, that people would assess what we've recommended and what the outcome is. Not the intent, the actual outcome. In the real world, it's not difficult to measure. It's patently obvious. All right, now, potentially, and we've got to see how it plays out, some good news. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said that the government will issue new dietary guidelines that are common sense and that stress the need to eat saturated fats, dairy, good meat, fresh meat. How you sort of separate good and fresh. I suppose, you don't want to eat stale or meat that's gone off, obviously. And vegetables. Sounds remarkably like what people ate before they were told not to eat these foods. And when we look at the world before people were told to avoid these foods and eat a lot of processed grains, cereals, and what might be described as frankenfoods, which are ultra-processed foods, we didn't have the rates of type 2 diabetes and obesity and a whole host of other related conditions or conditions that those two factors contribute to that we have today. But, of course, all the usual suspects will call Robert F. Kennedy Jr. a crank, and I really do want to emphasise one does not have to agree with everything a person says to be able to agree with something that they say. Nobody's going to be right all the time. Nobody. It's just not humanly possible. But real world data and information shows us that the low-fat dietary guidelines have been an abject failure. Abject failure. It doesn't matter how you slice and dice it. There's a fair bit of support, and we've spoken about this earlier in the year in an interview with Nicola Wright about the carnivore diet, and it's not for everybody, but it's amazing how many people it does work for, and you really do need to find what works for you. And that involves eating meat, yogurt, fermented vegetables, and really very, very little by way of carbs. The Mediterranean diet, which also has its supporters, is not exactly the same as what RFK's Junior is talking about, but it's not dissimilar. Again, very, very little processed foods. Mainly meat, fish, chicken, vegetables, nuts, seeds, berries, some olive oil, good fats, and again, never gets much airplay, but it is part of the Mediterranean diet, can be a glass of red wine, not a bottle, glass. Very quietly, cholesterol was removed as a nutrient of concern by the US Agricultural and Food Authorities. This was about 6 or 7 years ago. I didn't really tell anybody that dietary cholesterol is not the problem it was cracked up to be. It is a risk factor in heart disease and stroke, but it's not the biggest risk factor. And Ansel Keys, for those who want to go down a rabbit hole, who published what was called the 7 Nations study and put a study out showing a nice, neat, straight line showing a correlation between consumption of saturated fats and heart disease, was borderline fraudulent in that he studied 36 countries but only published 7. When you put the other 29 back in, his nice straight line disappears completely and there is no correlation. The Framingham study, which has run for many, many, many years, identified cholesterol as the 4th most significant factor. So behind cigarette smoking, diabetes, high blood pressure, cholesterol came in 4th. It was about a 0.3 factor. So not irrelevant, but not the biggest issue at all. And dietary cholesterol less so than what the body makes or manufactures. I mean, cholesterol is in every single cell in the human body, so it's not like we don't need it. Like most things with the human body, we don't need too much and we don't need it in the wrong place, but it's not like we don't need it, we do. But on the home front, there's been word that the NHMRC might recommend reduced meat consumption because the old crap about cows, cow flatulence, I'll use the polite or medical term, I think you all know what I'm referring to, that somehow warms the planet. It doesn't. Cows have been around since, the year dot. So that is not the problem. And by the way, fake meats, which I absolutely, and again, you have to make your own decisions, but, I would absolutely say to people, do not eat. The amount of energy and effort that goes into making this fake meat, the amount of energy is going to be far, 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 far more of an issue if one really wants to go down the weather path than a little bit of cow flatulence. But, don't mention the facts. It doesn't go down very well. If you don't want to eat meat, you don't have to. Some people, it is a religious thing. For some people, it's a moral thing. Some people just don't like it. That's absolutely fine if you don't want to. But then eat vegetables and other foods. Again, fake meat essentially says that the people who are making it are saying people actually do want to eat meat. They actually do want to eat it. So we'll make something that pretends that it is that, but it isn't. No. The amount of chemicals and preservatives and additives and, look, let's just not go there. And we spoke a couple of weeks ago, in fact, in episode, I'll get the correct number, so bear with me a moment, episode 118, about the UK government banning refillable soft drinks but allowing refillable diet soft drinks. Because apparently they're okay, and as we said in that episode, just to sum up quickly, you don't need to drink lots of soft drinks. It has lots of sugar. No, you don't need to refill your cup. Arguably, you don't need it at all. But if you want to, that really is your decision. But saying that's a problem and low-calorie soft drinks, not a problem. Again, a couple of interesting findings. Soft drink consumption at higher risk of major depressive disorders due to an effect on the gut microbiome. It's like, really? And also that, let me find this other one here that, here we go, artificial sweeteners in the brain. Artificial sweeteners may be harmful to health. They can affect memory. Now, I got a little bit of doubt about that, but, you know, again, it's just chemicals that the body has no need for. So the body will typically get rid of it, but it has obviously no nutritional value, and the body just doesn't need it. So whether it's harmful, look, I think there's a question mark. I wouldn't get too scared of it, but again, the best drink is water. If you want to have a diet drink now and again, that's fine, but don't make it your go-to or staple. But again, if we're going to start having discussions around health and health aspects, then these things don't exactly get a completely clean bill of health either, albeit for different reasons. And it just comes back to let's drink water. Mehmet Oz, who's obviously used to have his own TV show. I think he started his career on Oprah. Has expressed the view, and I'll quote here, many with obesity don't respect the temple of their souls. Of course, this will all be made fun of. But he has a point here, and I'll quote, most people I talk to are out of sorts, often having an ongoing existential crisis in their mind about why am I here, what's this all about? And they're not able to make peace with all those elements, and they don't respect the temple of their soul because they don't realise how precious it is, the most valuable thing you've ever been given. It's hard for me to meet someone who's depressed and overeating because the only thing they think about, they control in their life is the fork at the end of their arm. Look, I'm not sure that I completely agree with every word of this, but he goes on to say that people do comfort eat, which I suppose really is the take-home message. And it's true, people do, for a variety of reasons. Again, it doesn't make anybody a bad person, okay? But we can't deny that it happens. And, maybe that is something to think about as well. Why do some of us eat more than we need to, and maybe eat foods that we really know are not that good for us, but maybe do provide some short-term comfort, albeit at some longer-term expense. What can we take from all of this? Let's ignore the personalities. It's not about Oz. It's not about RFKJ. It's about eating pretty much as our ancestors did for millenniums. Foods that they could gather or catch. Foods that if you didn't eat them today or in the next couple of days, you'd have to throw out or, in the modern era, freeze. Not foods you can put on the shelf and eat in 3 years' time. Foods with ingredients that you would recognise as food, or as Michael Pollan, the food writer from the United States, said, foods that your grandmother or great-grandmother, depending when you were born, would recognise as food. Get somebody from the 1940s or 50s even, bring them into a supermarket today, and they will ask the question, what are all these boxes and what's inside them? And the boxes are very colourful, but what's inside them is typically pretty beige. So, foods that until fairly recently were moving around or growing somewhere. It's not that difficult. It is the 21st century. Can we completely avoid some packaged and processed foods? Look, we probably can, but it's difficult and it's not necessary. Think about the 80-20. Get the basics right most of the time, and you can have some treats and you can have some other foods that may not be, in inverted commas, perfect. It's not a religion. You get the basics right. This is where people have gone over to variably, keto, carnivore, and assorted other diets, which are probably closer to that mark. Often find that, number one, if they're looking to do that, they'll lose weight, and number two, they often say they have more energy because they're doing what suits their body. Now, every single person is slightly different. You do need to find what works for you, and that is a little bit of trial and error. But the person who's most likely to find what works for you is not me. It's not even your doctor. It's certainly not the government. It's you. Thanks for listening to Dr. Joe Unplugged. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, share, and consider subscribing. Tell your friends. If there are topics you'd like to see covered, be in touch through the chat or email info@drjoe.net.au. We'll be uploading new content each Monday, and soon we'll be putting these videos out on X. You can follow me there at Dr. Joe's DIY Health.